Hey folks, welcome to the Pop Culture SquadCast. I'm Bob Harrison, and today we have a special episode where we interviewed the creators of The Pedestrian, which is coming soon from Magma Comics. We have Sean Von Gorman and Joey Esposito on the show. We're going to be talking to them real quick about what went into making The Pedestrian, what you guys can expect from reading it. Again, it's coming out in August from Magma Comics. And we also talked about a bunch of geeky stuff and nerdy stuff. Make sure you watch along and listen along. I make a special appearance in a comic later on in the episode, somewhere around 15 minutes or so. So check that out a little before. And also, don't forget to check out that there is a trailer embedded in this show. So you got to keep watching, and you'll find out all about the Pedestrian from Magma Comics. We're looking forward to it. And again, make sure you like and follow all of our stuff, subscribe to this channel, and enjoy our conversation with Sean Von Gorman and Joey Esposito. Thanks. Hey guys, welcome to the SquadCast. How you doing?
Oh, fantastic.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Sean, you're back again. We've had you before, but Joey, welcome for the first time. I'm really excited to have you guys here, and we're going to talk about the Pedestrian and a bunch of other stuff. I would like for you guys to talk about where the Pedestrian came from and kind of the road you've traveled here. The first thing was like 2 or 3 years ago now when you guys started working on this, and now we're on the road to publication on August 7th.
Yeah, it's kind of wild to believe that it's actually going to come out.
It's not wild to believe. It's exciting to believe, right?
Exciting to believe, but it's been a long road that we've walked in a legal straight line way, adhering to all street signs, but
crosswalks.
We've arrived. But yeah, Sean, it was quarantine and the world was ending and everything was bleak, and Sean brought me this character design that he'd done of the Pedestrian, and it was just kind of like instant inspiration, and we just sort of were off to the races.
So Sean, what made you draw this guy? Like, where did you come up with this?
The thinking of it was, what if like we had a character sort of like the Flash with like a costume, but like without any powers. I thought it would be really funny to have just a character kind of power walking around the city in real time, and to spend that kind of, the earliest version of this idea was this guy kind of puttering around a town, and most of an issue is just him kind of walking in real time and waiting for the crosswalk and the stop signs, and thought just how funny that would be. But I didn't really have much more than just kind of that bit of a character inspired by, the little blinking man in the traffic sign. And working with Joey on Pawn Shop, I just remembered how great Joey was of writing really rich, believable characters, and thought how cool would it be to work with Joey to kind of flesh out this world and this concept. So he sort of had the sort of wacky aspects of it, but I thought it'd be really funny to go sort of like the Ghostbusters route of making a really believable world, except for this one thing.
Yeah. Well, I get that. Yeah, it's like, and let's get out there. I've read issue 1. We will try to keep spoilers to a minimum, but I'm super excited about it. I think you guys really hit the ball out of the park. I think that this is definitely something that people will enjoy, and what you're going to get from it, for those who are watching and listening, is that it is this very believable, mundane little town with someone who is different. It's something that changes the dynamic of the town, and I'm looking forward to exploring that and where that's going to go with this book. So Joey, we're at the point where Sean has this crazy idea. He draws this non-supery looking superhero type person, somebody who you might see at a con, in some cosplay. Very much that's the feel you get from the look of it.
Yeah.
And where do you go with that? How do you?
So the first reaction that I had to it was a memory of growing up in my hometown. There was a guy, still, as far as I know, still doing this, but he would just be power walking like everywhere. You would see him almost daily, just kind of like going to the grocery store or just around town, and I never knew what his name was. I don't think anyone I know knew what his name was, but he was just sort of like a fixture. So
Sure.
that's sort of like, that was the first thought that I had. And then it sort of led me down this path of thinking about growing up in my town. And I think that's where all the character stuff stemmed from for this book. So you have a cast of characters who grew up in Summer City. And, for me, growing up in a town like that, which is sort of like on the backslide of its heyday, I grew up in a town where GE was a major employer, and they closed a bunch of factories in the 80s and laid off tons of people, and it just sort of devastated the town, and they left a bunch of pollution behind. And just sort of like thinking about growing up in a town that everyone tells you is doomed, and like there's no future for you here, you have to get out, and yet like all the adults around you are firmly rooted in that place. And so how that changes your perception of where you live and what community means to you. And that sort of all seeped into the characters that live in Summer City. And so like from there, in addition to like the sort of wilder concepts that we've been talking about and that you'll see as the issues go on, I think that's sort of what brought the book together as a whole.
That's awesome. And you get into a couple of things I want to talk about. One is as the issues go on, what is the idea of the length of this series? Where are we committed to for now?
We are greenlit for 4 issues.
Okay, good.
But we have ideas that we can go on for 3 significant arcs.
Okay.
We have the possibility of having this be an ongoing. Magma is a new publisher. They don't want to commit,
of course,
to something. But if we can get the numbers where we need to be, we could have this be an ongoing and get to probably the weirdest payoff of a comic that we've seen in our generation.
Okay. So you're threatening.
No hyperbole.
You're holding us hostage. We have to get a certain amount before we get that payoff.
I mean, I would say there's. Sorry, Sean. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say it seems it's a very deceptive piece where we're sending it out to a lot of people. Anyone who will look at it, pros, retailers. A lot of the notes we're getting back are like, "We love this. This is great. This is so funny," and people not really prepared of where this is going to go. There's a very real, urgent story linked to this. A lot of what seeped into the mix was us working on this in secret for a year during lockdown.
Sure.
Social justice issues, isolation, watching communities being broken apart by corporations, and we thought it'd be really cool to have a hero, especially a hero of color, who doesn't use violence to solve problems.
Yeah, I mean, it's really smart. A lot of the writing, and and the execution in the art is, it takes you're forced to take a step back as a reader, because you're like, okay, this is not typical. This is not what I expect necessarily from either of you. It's in all the best ways. Not that there's anything wrong with what I would expect, but you have challenged my expectations. You've challenged what I'm expecting.
Thank you.
And part of that is one of the things that I noticed as I was reading it. I know you both, and there's a lot of both of you in this book. Literally a lot of Sean, at least on one page.
Very accurate to his real personality, by the way.
As
is your cameo, and I'm sorry for that.
Totally.
For the readers, I did put myself in a cameo being horrible in a retail type of situation, which it's I don't want to say it's how I am all the time, but it's I think is an honest representation of how I can get, and I'm looking to get caught, and this is my way of asking for help because I don't know how to change.
It's only when you have the sunglasses on, though.
That's the key.
But thank you for saying that, because I feel like we've challenged ourselves and each other on this book. And in terms of like challenging the reader, that's something that I know we're both interested in, putting this together. And like, I remember reading when we finally had the final version of number 1, I was like, this is pretty as offbeat as I was hoping, but also like we talk a lot about little details that will be caught on a second read, which is something that's really important, I think, to both of us, particularly to me. But like, I want this to be a rewarding read, that if something feels like, oh, that's a weird moment or whatever, my hope is that once you go back after you sort of see the whole scheme of the story, you'll pick up on these things that like make sense, and that we're seeding things that happen a few issues down the line. And I like the idea of trusting the reader to pay close attention, especially with Sean's wonderful art in this book. There's a lot of stuff that are small details, but that are ultimately critical to the story that we're telling. And hopefully, that encourages people to linger and really like take in what they're reading.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. There's a couple of things that kind of stood out to me. One of the things, Sean and I have, for full disclosure, Sean and I have known each other almost 10 years now, and there's something about
both
his
at
art.
My wedding.
We were both at.
That's true. Great time.
We won't talk about the night we met, but
I was a little wild in those days.
It was a little wild. It was a long time ago. It was a young Sean.
I was balancing a lot of needs.
It was a good night. Anyway, we're gonna get back to this. So the thing is that there's something about Sean's art that that works really well with your writing, Joey. And this is not the first time you guys have worked together. You worked on Pawn Shop, as you mentioned earlier. Why do you guys want to work together? I mean, you're in a situation where you're independent, creator-owned, producing comics. You get the choice of who you want to work with. If you're working for one of the bigger publishers, you kind of get assigned an artist, or you get assigned an assignment for a writer. You guys have come back to work together a second time and more. What do you like about working together?
For me, I mean, Sean's art is just, he has a way of expression and also design that I think just works well with my own aesthetic and the kinds of characters that I like to write.
I just want to say though that this character over here is some pretty excellent. This guy
also very accurate to the real personality.
This guy right here, I really like this cop guy over here.
Here's the thing.
I don't know. I've never seen him before in my life though.
Didn't meet you yet when I was writing this character, and I apologize for putting words in your mouth.
I'm cursing, so it's fine.
He's a real misogynistic asshole, and I know that's not what you are. So apologies.
So when we did meet in person, you're like, oh, I totally got that guy wrong.
I was like, oh.
I don't think Joey made the connection until like this morning.
Yeah,
when he texted me, he goes, "Wait,
really?
Hold on."
I texted him this morning.
Hold on, is like, in the book? Like, yeah.
Listen, I think it's fun. But yeah, so, and again, there's a lot of each other, a lot of yourselves in this. The small town reminds me of kind of Joey, where you grew up. Whereas there's characters who come from a big city, which is where Sean's from, and a lot. To be honest with you, a lot of it feels kind of city-ish, where Sean's from. So, but at the heart of this story, from what I've gotten in the first issue, is that there is this character, and I'm calling him a character because I don't know enough about him, but there's also who appears to be trying to do the right thing in a place where people need help. And I think that's one of the things that brings all of us into comics, kind of that concept of looking for people to do the right thing. I think there's a thread that really sits at the bottom of what attracts people to comic books.
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
you hit that.
Thank you.
There is a lot going on to the character. There is a clear story, and there's lots of clues in how he's presenting. But he's
Yep.
also a blank slate as well,
Sure.
where you can kind of pin your hopes and dreams and expectations on this guy. And I think a lot of this is our discussions of, what would you have? I mean, what's Superman's greatest power? It's not flying. It's not super strength. He's always going to do the right thing whenever possible. And that's something you can depend on this guy. Well, at the same time, he's living in a very real world. And if you have someone in a costume who beats up a bunch of people, that guy's going to jail. And how many times has someone saved you or helped you out without having to beat up a bunch of people? Like they've had your keys, or they were there listening to you when you had a rough day, or they helped you double park that car, or you had a big home project that you needed a hand with. And that's kind of what we have here.
Right.
And we're kind of seeing, I think we're showing someone who's, this is loosely based on someone I used to work with. He was kind of that guy who you'd go to the bar and he'd be like, "Oh, I don't drink. You can drink, but I don't drink." And he would just kind of sit there in the at the corner of the bar, just like being that guy. I thought, how wacky to just kind of be in the situation and be yourself, and being very vocal of yourself, of trying to lead by example in a situation where no one's really being receptive to it. And I thought that was always a comical kind of aspect, where he's living in a very real world and he's out presenting of like an example of, how to be. And there's reasons for why he's out there. There's some cosmic elements that maybe we're not aware of, very Lynchian, I'd say, in terms of things we don't perceive and understand, that he's very much aware of. And he can kind of see the connections of things and where things need to be and the place things needs to be in a certain way. And we're gonna slowly start to see, especially in issue 2, where we set up a very clear story and we kind of smash the cookie jar in a sense, come issue 2, in a very David Lynchian way, I think.
I'm very excited for that. I kind of want to dive into a couple of questions here that are kind of together, and we'll see how it comes out. But I was thinking about talking to you guys, and one of the words that kind of shouts out to when I think about both of you is perseverance. 99. So my partner on the Pop Culture SquadCast, Mike Gold, likes to talk about comics. It's the world's best donut shop, right? We live in a very small ecosystem where we know most of the people and we enjoy being there, and it's a great donut shop. But 99% of the people in the donut shop are here because they made their way in. Everybody has their own story. Everybody has their own method in. There's a great, there's a story that Mark Waid, I think, is attributed with saying that whenever somebody finds their way into the comics world, we figure out how that is and close that door. So everybody has to make their own door, right? You both have worked super hard and earned your seat at the table. How do you feel about where you guys are right now? I mean, over the past couple of years, you both have done some amazing things and been, more successful than you have been over the years after all this hard work you've put in. What do you think about that?
It's a great question.
I think right now I'm in a place where I'm very comfortable in my own skin, where I know what I have to offer. I am clear as to what, how I can make a project better or deliver on promises I make. I'm working on a couple of other projects right now that are licensed and working with, musicians and rappers, where I'm able to come into a room and confidently say, okay, this is cool, but this is what you need, and this is what I can bring you. And I think a lot of that comes from, comics is a team sport, and it's knowing how to trust people and knowing how to take a merry-go-round of punches consistently, and knowing how to take those punches and how to roll with those punches, and also having a maturity to know that, there's a level of rejection to this. We've received loads of rejections for this project, and
Sure.
it's probably the best thing we've ever done and may ever do, with no ego to it. We worked on it in secret, with no ego, just trying to make the best comic we could possibly make, where we've even taken elements from other pitches that didn't quite take off, of us waiting for permission to do a comic, where a lot of times you send an idea to a publisher and you send it out around, and if they say it's okay, you can make that comic. But that's really not true. If you make a comic, you're making comics. Welcome to the club.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And we've been through every publisher, to the point where I had to tell Joey, like, I think the publisher we need probably doesn't exist yet, because we went through IDW,
And now it
Dynamite.
exists.
Now it exists, and they were ready for us.
It's true. And, like you say perseverance, and I think that's like 100% the case. But also, like, there were times that it's hard when
Sure.
you see, for example, like I was in the DC Writers Workshop, and that was a great experience. And at the time, I thought that was going to be like, oh, this is going to be like the first step, right? Like I'm going to get some work and blah, blah, blah. And that didn't happen, and that's okay. But it took me a while to like Sean said, be comfortable in my own skin and remember like why I'm doing this and what's actually important versus what's like a nice to have. And I think what's important first and foremost is the work and building the relationships that I have with my collaborators. Like all that I want to do is just make cool shit, and it would be great to make a living at it, of course, but I can find other ways to pay the bills. You know what I mean? And I think just if I had found more success when I was younger, I'm not sure that I would be in a place to like appreciate it or make the best use of that platform. I always tell my wife that like I think I needed to figure myself out first before I could find like creative satisfaction. Because, in my 20s, I was a mess, and who isn't? And I think sometimes you see people find sort of like early success and then completely like just burn out. And I think that, speaking only for myself, I feel like I have the experience and, the sort of like world knowledge as far as that goes to like understand my place and know what my strengths and weaknesses are, and be able to work towards being better, but also just like be more focused on the right objectives, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. That's great. I mean, that's the point I was trying to get at. I think you guys have gotten there. I want to
therapy is helpful.
Listen, we all know that, right? I want to kind of bring it back to the core of it. Why? I don't know if I've ever asked this to Sean, but like, why comics? What is it about this medium that you have decided or been compelled, or however it works out, for it to be your medium of artistic expression?
I think in my younger days, I lacked focus, and I had lots of interests. I was, in bands, and I was trying to be an actor and also being an artist. And I would have a lot more fun, I think, making the posters for the gig than doing the work of getting people to the gig. And I think, comics is just something that I found all of my talents have come in handy from, organizing projects and showmanship and, just talking to people, because a lot of my background has been in some sort of customer service, front facing, dealing with people. And I found, when going into comics, being able to have a conversation with someone is a superpower, especially you're at a show, you're at a table, being able to make people feel comfortable to give you money. And, I started pretty late. I was in probably, pushing 30 at the time. I had a kid. I had another kid on the way, and my wife at the time just kind of said, you kind of have to pick something and see what happens. And I decided I would pursue art. So I took a year and I got my act together and got a portfolio and started putting myself out there to get jobs. And at the end of that year, I found myself in Axel Alonso's office at Marvel Comics talking about something I had put together that, through the sheer odd circumstance of you're in a right time and right place to then meet the then head of Disney Pictures, who says something to the effect of, "Oh, you do a comic? We don't really do the publishing side of it, but we just bought Marvel. I can make some calls." And then gets me a meeting with Axel Alonso at Marvel, who then gives me and my writing partner, TV's Todd Hunt, a crash course on comics and like what we need to be focusing on. And I figured, let me give that another year.
Yeah.
Because it was just such a wild, the things that happened of me getting into comics are not typical and strange and fantastical. And I appreciate every opportunity that has presented itself, and every single person who has had, some sort of hand in, encouraging me from like very high levels that like does not happen, where a lot of the stuff I've done to pursue comics and have a place for myself in this industry comes from a level of, this doesn't happen to everybody, and me wanting to match the energy of just the wild stuff that would happen that got us into this.
Now that door is shut.
No. Yes, we shut that door.
I
Nobody can meet
wouldn't say-
Axel Alonso that way anymore.
Well, it's not shut, but Neil Gaiman did have a significant role where I had also met Neil working in at a hotel. I was working in a hotel, and Neil Gaiman walks in, and I go, "Well, I have to talk to Neil."
Well,
you
have to.
And I say hello to Neil. I say, "Hello, Neil. My name is Sean. I love you." And I was reading 1602 at the time, and I was like, 1602. I love 1602. And he was traveling with his then girlfriend Amanda Palmer, and he runs out the door and he drags in Amanda Palmer. Goes, wait, hold on, Amanda, I want you to meet Sean. Sean's awesome because like 1602. and during these big elements of the building of this, we had given him a copy of the book, and he's always been very supportive and generous with praise, and he's presented praise to people I know behind my back that has gotten to me. And funny enough, last night, this is completely true. I was walking around where I work in the city. Apparently Neil and Frank Miller were doing a talk for a screening of a documentary by Frank Miller.
Mm-hmm.
I'm walking down the street near the Angelica. As I'm coming down the street, there's like a mob of people outside the Angelica, as out comes Neil Gaiman, who's being horribly harassed by people trying to get autographs, and like, oh no, this is really rough. And it was a scary situation, because these were not like gentle Neil Gaiman fans. These were like eBay sellers of like getting really aggressive, and they're all swarming on him. And then randomly, Frank Miller just kind of saunters out of this. No one's paying attention to Frank. He just kind of walks gently to his car as Neil's in the situation. And I had commented on this of like, I hadn't seen Neil in several years, and I happened upon him in this instance.
Right.
Not the time to say hello, but like getting ready to like pull people off him because he's trying to get to his car. And I hit him up on Blue Sky, and he was very kind to respond to it of like, that was wild. Thankfully, Frank gently walked to his car. I honestly think maybe Frank pushed him out before and then just walked to his car, knowing
threw him on the grenade.
Yeah,
it's just like, you go.
Here you go.
That's my perception, because no one was paying attention to Frank
Neil
Miller.
is a little more hardy these days, so I think that makes sense. I think he should go first.
He's a bit younger.
Well, a little, but so I want, one of the things you said, and we're going to get to Joey in a minute, so please hang on. But one of the things you said about how you got here, I want to take advantage and let you know that as an artist, your growth in the time that I've known you has been phenomenal. It's not just about right time, right place. You've put in work. What you can shows in this book, it shows in everything you do. Like it's not the work that you've put in is not missed. We can see it, so it's important.
I would echo that. I know I've told you this, but like, I think it's important to say that, like, yeah, you got a lucky meeting, but people get lucky meetings all the time. I had a lucky meeting, sure, and I beefed it so hard. You know what I mean? And I think that, like, the most important thing is doing the work and showing growth and showing the persistence, as you said, Bob. And I think Sean's work, like, I love Pawn Shop. I think we're proud of it. People liked it. But if you compare Pawn Shop to Pedestrian, I think, like, for both of us, it's just no comparison. It's like, it's an evolution for sure. But I think Pedestrian is so much sharper and more mature and just like has a lot more craft behind it. And I think that's super important. And I think, like, just to keep growing as an artist or as a writer is the most important thing, even, in the face of any sort of like critical success or financial success or whatever it might be. Like, if you can't grow beyond where you started, then what is the point, And I think Sean for sure has done that.
I agree. I want to touch on where you come. Like, as an illustrator, comics is an easy. If you're an illustrator and you're a storyteller, if you have those two things, comics is an easy place. That's where I need to be, because I want to tell stories, but I'm going to draw something. I'm going to illustrate it as the story I tell. Writing has a lot of different mediums that you can choose. What made you want to be in comics? Why do you want to write stories this way?
I think for me, I mean, I grew up loving comics since I can remember. My parents collected comics, and so it's just always been around. And wait,
hold on. Your parents collected comics. Explain that a little bit.
So my parents grew up they were born in the 40s, grew up in the 50s. Mm-hmm. And my mom loves to tell the story about how my grandfather, like, she used to collect all of the super books, like, Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane, and Jimmy Olsen, and all that stuff, and just like had piles of them. And when she grew up in Brooklyn, and when she moved out, my grandfather just chucked them all because they're comic books, whatever. And she's like, still talks about that to this day. She's almost 80.
That's awesome. That's
so
fantastic.
So like growing up, they were always like, comics were always around. They would take me to the comic shows in town, or just bring me home comics or whatever. And anything sort of like creative that I wanted to do was always supported. It was, there was never really like, you shouldn't be an artist or whatever. It was always supportive, and they always supported my collecting habits, which if you see my office is just full of toys and comics and whatever, never throws anything away. And I think it stems from my grandfather throwing away my mom's comics. So she's never been one to like, you have to get rid of stuff. So encourage my collecting habit for sure. But as a part of that, I just fell in love with comics. I wanted to be an illustrator. I didn't have the fortitude or commitment to like really, make that path happen. But comics was always my number one. And, when you're 18, you have to decide what you want to do with your life before you have even lived in the world at all.
Right.
The closest that I thought I could come was going to film school. So that's what I did. And, thinking of film as like a live action comic book, essentially. But then while I was in school, they had a graphic novel comics course.
Where'd you go to school? Sorry.
I went to Long Island University, CW Post.
Okay. And
so there was a course that the first semester was, talking about comics. It was, Mouse and like Chris Ware works and Fun Home and things like that. And just sort of like the analytical side. And then the second semester was actually creating your own comics. And that's sort of, making my own mini comics and staying up all night at Kinko's and photocopying my shitty little, it was called Cancer and Fun. It was about a cigarette and an ashtray comic strip. Crudely drawn. I still have them, but they're not great. But that was sort of where I like put it together that like, the people who write and draw these comic books, like that's like a job that you can do. And it's like pretty low barrier to entry, especially in the mid 2000s when web comics were starting to really blow up. And, MySpace had like a whole comics thing back then. And so that's sort of where I decided to like spend my time. It was just like it kind of all finally gelled together when I was in school. And so once school was over, I was working in a coffee shop and just like kind of started writing my own stuff. And then for fun, I would write about comics on the internet, just doing like reviews and interviews and stuff with creators. And sort of like somehow that ended up leading me down a path of like being in the comics press, which was also cool, but also like not really what I wanted to be doing. It's just sort of where I wound up. And as a benefit to that, like I met a lot of great people. I met a lot of creators who became friends and were very like generous with their time and helpful with feedback on my early comics work. And I think like ultimately in 2013, I decided like I don't want to continue down this path when I'm trying to like, the thing I actually want to do is like directly conflicting with like being a journalist, right? Like I'm not going to like report on a publisher, but also try to get work from them. And so I made the call and I was like, I'm done with the press stuff. I don't want to do that anymore. I'm quit my job at IGN and like focus on comics full time. Fell flat on my face hardcore. Like ended up living at home and
perseverance is the key,
just
right?
like it was pretty dark. And then but like through this whole time, like there's no other option but to just keep creating, right? So like you just keep going. And during that time was Punch Up got picked up and came out, and that sort of like helped get me back on the path, and things grew from there. And Pawn Shop is like directly responsible for me getting into that DC program that I talked about. But comics is just like, it's such a unique medium. Anything is possible, and the barrier to completing something comparatively is so low. Like if you have the willpower, you can do it. Like yeah, sure, sometimes it costs some money, but like not as much money to make a film or whatever. But like the possibilities of what you can do in comics is infinite. And just, I don't know, the creativity that you see from creators of all walks of life is just so inspiring. Like, I just don't know why anyone would want to do anything else, truly.
That's fantastic. I mean, perseverance is a great word. Like I said, you went through it, you did what you wanted to do, and you got there. You've written Batman. That's
Sure.
pretty cool, man.
Not everyone gets to do that.
Not everybody does get to do that.
I remember me and Joey were having dinner at C2E2, sort of at the midway point of our journey through this. We had, we've either had some offers fall through, had some bad offers that we turned down. I think we were having a moment where, Joey and I were just sort of commiserating about the process, because when we started, I was like, this is not going to fail, Joey. This is going to happen. I don't know how, but this is going to happen. And I think Joey was talking about, wanting to do more Batman stuff. And he had a couple really great stories. He had, the stuff in Urban Legends where he's teaming up with Plastic Man and he's teaming up with Aquaman. And
I just
at
need
the time,
to I just need to introduce, and I want to come back to it. I just need you to know that randomly and ironically, I think Mike Gold was reading that Batman Plastic Man story today, because he just sent me a picture of it, and he's out of nowhere, like he doesn't know that we're talking right now, and so Mike Gold was reading your story. Go ahead.
Sweet.
Continue.
Thank you.
Where he's like, Joey's had a journey with DC. He's been doing, just the stuff that's been put out, but there's also been stuff that you probably haven't seen. It's a whole intricate network of how things work that people don't understand. And I've applied for these types of contests as well and not made it through. So, I mean, just getting through that is such a huge thing, and being able to work in there is such a huge thing, where, and just kind of being like, I wish I could do more, where it's like, I was reminded of a conversation I was having with Dave Bullock a number of years ago, where he had a huge background, like DC animation, like worked very closely with Darwin Cook on, Batman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond. And, he was doing like a Batman black and white short a number of years ago, where I had congratulated him on. I was like, oh, that's fantastic, you're getting to do Batman. And he goes, yeah, I mean, a lot of people, will do Batman for a while and they'll have a significant run. And then some people get to do Batman once and never again. And the fact that Joey has done Batman multiple times with really wacky stories that, you probably wouldn't get to do in a regular Batman story. At the time, he had just had a story where he teams up with Aquaman, and Batman has a splash page where he's riding a fucking killer whale. And I just had to be like, Joey, what more are you looking to do with this character? You did it. They can't take that away from you. You did that. That's on your resume for as long as you want it to be.
And that, that conversation really, truly was a turning point for me when I was feeling a little, I mean, it wasn't just like, DC's not giving me more work or whatever. And even after that conversation, I got more work. So it was like, but also
Rightfully
just kind of like bringing my focus back to what's really important, which is like, doing that stuff is awesome. And I love doing it, but I don't have to say yes to everything that comes my way if it's not like really interesting to me, because the most important stuff is creating new things with Sean or other collaborators, like that's why I started doing this in the first place. And I love superheroes. I love that stuff. But like, there's nothing better than seeing fucking Mike Allred draw a character that you're writing. You know what I mean?
I mean, let's talk about that. First of all, I was looking through I'm looking through and I'm like, that's a Mike Allred cover. That's fantastic. And it's perfect. It's the perfect understanding and representation of this character. It's weird to me that Mike Allred has adapted your character, right? He has put his spin. Like, it's a Mike Allred cover. You can see it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put it up right now. But it's gorgeous. But like, how crazy is that? That.
Very crazy. I mean, Mike Allred, reading. I was on a very long Amtrak train ride where I was going with my family and my 1.5-year-old child at the time from New York to Orlando, Florida, because we thought that would be a fun thing to do. And it stopped being fun after like the 5th hour. And this was a 24-hour train ride. So this is when Comixology had taken off, and there was like a free #1 issue of Madman on there. So I downloaded it on my phone, and I read probably the first 2 volumes of Madman right then and there, because I had understood comics, I thought, in a way, but seeing that initial volume of Madman made me go, oh, I get this. It was like black and white, very minimal color. I was like, oh, I can wrap my head around this. And that made me want to make my first comic. And I always knew that, when the right project would come along, I would want Mike Allred to do that cover. And I got to meet him a few years later, back when I had my first comic. He was in New York for a show. And this is when my party trick was, I was doing a book about Harry Houdini. So I would do like straitjacket escapes at shows and conventions. And so I approached Mike Allred and I introduced myself. Mike, I love you, blah, blah, blah. Here's my book. And then I go, would you like to put me in a straitjacket? And he looks at me and goes, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. Let's do it tomorrow. We're have a big line, and you can do something to entertain the crowd. So I come back the next day with my straitjacket, and him and Mike is, we're filming it, and I'm pretending like I don't know who he is. Like, hey, so what's your name, young man? He goes, I'm Mike Allred. And he goes, well, to tell us what you do. And he
tell him he was a tracer.
Well, he kind of pulls back and goes, I write and draw comic books. And there was like a serenity in his eyes. There was like a certainty of his energy of, I'm Mike Allred, and I write and I draw comics. And it was like, whoa.
Did he say, I'm Mike fucking Allred? Like, is that the way it went? Because like, basically, that's what you get that point. Like, I'm Mike Allred. You know what?
But I think that's why he's so cool. It's like he doesn't feel he doesn't. It's like about the work, right? Like he doesn't.
Yeah, but he simply is. He is. Yeah. He's living his art. He's got his loving, beautiful wife. He's got his beautiful family. And when he was putting me in the straitjacket, he goes, "Hey, Laura, help me out, honey." And so then him and Laura are tying me into a straitjacket, and I'm doing my thing. And this is another level to this. Years later, I'm at a show with Jamie Rich, and we're talking, and he doesn't know who I am. I'm introducing who I am and like telling him about what I've done. He goes, "Wait a second. You're the straitjacket guy?"
Yeah, there you
go. Next to Allred at that show, and you were that guy. And I was like, oh, okay, so you've heard of me, and we've been friendly since. So then, Dean Haspiel was the first person we showed this to after our year of silence, because Dean's always been a friend and supportive to the up and comers. Who are coming up in the world, and he's always been a champion for this book in particular. And I had asked him to do a cover. He was the first cover we did, and he's the variant B that we have on this. And we were talking about comics in general. This was still probably during lockdown, and Dean was probably going through maybe a little bit of an existential crisis, as he does every year on his birthday. And we would have these long talks about the project and his approach to it, because he was having trouble kind of figuring out what he wanted to do with it. And then a level of inspiration came to him where he had this giant stop sign in his house that his brother stole from off the street somewhere. So it's like, oh, what if it's like they're in the stop sign and like having a fight? And I was like, that's great. And then we were talking about like the origins of this, and he was like, who else would you see as a cover? And it's like Mike Allred. Obviously, he goes, well, I know Mike. I could give you his email. I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. So he gives me Mike Allred's email. I reach out to Mike Allred, and I'm like, hey, Mike, my name is Sean Gorman. You may not remember this, but you put me in a straitjacket a couple years ago. And he writes back, of course I remember you. I've never put anyone else in a straitjacket before. And which is nice. It was I was hoping that would be the strong reaction, and I sent him what we had with the book, and he immediately got it and had something existing very soon after. And my favorite thing about Mike Allred emails is he's very brief. Like it's either like groovy or cool, like 2-word emails. Yeah. And the longest email he had ever written me was I had him do a cover for another book, which we were on the show talking about, Ghost Planet.
Right, sure.
And I bought the art for both of them, and that happened second. So he ships a package to my house that FedEx marks as delivered, but there's nothing at my house. So I shoot him a quick email like, hey, heads up, I'm sure it's gonna be fine, but this is marked as delivered, but there's nothing here. And he writes the longest email or the longest bit of writing I think he has ever written about his disdain for porch pirates, and going into great detail about, he had like a home invasion a few years before that, where he really souped up his security in his home of like cameras and like a whole security system. But then like this big thing that's really bugging him is that despite all these upgrades to his security at his home, the porch pirates are just taking Amazon packages off of his floor, and then goes on into great detail about how he wants to fashion some sort of Wile E. Coyote contraption to capture porch pirates. And it's my favorite email I've gotten ever. And then thankfully the package arrives, and he responds like, hey, Mike, don't worry, false alarm. It's here. And he writes back, groovy.
Yeah, there you go. That's awesome. That's great. I want to kind of wrap up on where we are here with Pedestrian. It's August 7th is issue 1, followed in September by issue 2. Yes,
correct.
Yes,
and we've got 4 issues so far. We're looking for everybody to get them. Magma Comics is the publisher, so make sure you talk to your wherever you get comics from, and order it, pre-order it, get it out there. Was the FOC done? Are we still in range for that?
So
FOC is coming up at the end of July.
Beginning of July, I think.
At the beginning of July.
Right. So you still have time. You're watching this. Make sure you go to your shop. Make sure you say you want the Pedestrian. Get that. It's important. It's going to be worth it. Believe me. It's definitely something that people are going to want to get behind. I wanted to switch.
The response that we've gotten from this has been surreal, where it's nothing we've sent out has gotten this level of people digging it, but also kind of getting it and being very in tune with it.
Sure.
Where we've had to like sort of pivot a little bit, and we're looking to like send it to our enemies to like get an honest response. Like I sent it to my ex-wife the other day, and she kind of liked it. And
wow. You didn't tell me that.
Well, this just happened. It was a long conversation where I also want to send it. I'm going to send it to my dad as well. We haven't spoken in years. and I even sent it to like a very like kind of gatekeepery type of comic shop. I won't say the name, but they, it was like one of those places that like you wouldn't think would be open to something weird like this. And they respond back like, wow, this was actually pretty good. We got something here.
Like I said, I'm super excited about it. I want to let's this is a SquadCast, and we talk about pop culture in general besides just comics. So 3 of us were kind of geeking out a little bit before before we started recording. One of the things that's kind of like been a kind of a through line to people of our generation, my generation and younger, at least, is which you guys fall into, is the mesh of comics fandom and cartoons. Story action cartoons. When you guys were growing up, what were the cartoons that you guys either needed to make sure you watched in the morning before you went to school, or made sure you got home and off the bus and watched?
Ooh, this is probably the early 90s. So, before school, I mean, we've got some like 80s, 90s bleed over here. So talking early years like He-Man, Thundercats, stuff like that. But, in the sweet spot of the mid 90s, we're talking Power Rangers, we're talking Gargoyles, Darkwing Duck. That whole afternoon block was solid, and I didn't get any homework done during those years, and that probably explains why I don't have a pool right now, or am a doctor. But especially with stuff like Power Rangers, and Joey and I both have a love for like any type of show derived from like a Super Sentai / American thing. Like we even had a book we were trying to make called Laser Titans years ago as a pitch that never took off.
I've seen some Laser Titans somewhere. I don't know where.
Well, we figured this was the book that we always wanted to make that no one would let us make. So we're like, we're going to do everything we want to do in a comic. So we also incorporated elements of that pitch where that project is a TV show within the world of the Pedestrian to like layer it a little bit, because we had these designs and robots that we didn't want to go to waste, that we really enjoyed.
I love that. I love that aspect. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, even the animation that you'll see intersected in here, roll the clip now. Where that happened after we a publisher, and I just kind of woke up and we were kind of down for, kind of sad for like one night, and I woke up the next day. I was like, well, fuck those guys. I'm gonna fucking. They don't know what they're talking about. I'm gonna just make an animated trailer, and I taught myself how to animate cell by cell. So all the stuff you see walking was fueled by me going, fuck this. They don't know this is gonna happen. And I think in the 90s, like a lot of those touchstones, you know, it's like there's a connection to theme song to the story, and I think especially with stuff like Gargoyles, we saw sort of like a new level of in-depth storytelling that I think always resonated with us. I think you know, you kind of see DNA of like Madman, Gargoyles, of this level of, you know, there's flashiness to it, but there's some real storytelling in there, especially with stuff like Gargoyles, where it's like that's probably my first exposure to like Shakespeare, where they're incorporating Shakespeare characters in this world of fantastical monsters who turn stone by day.
Right.
Batman the animated series was huge for me, but Power Rangers is really you can't see it, but I have a whole wall of just like weird Power Rangers. I call it side merch. It's stuff like slide puzzles or like cake toppers, just like not the action figures, but like all like the crazy merch that happened in 1993 all of a sudden, where like anyone possible was trying to cash in on Power Rangers. But what I love about Power Rangers is this idea of like, and I think it's really seeped into how I approach comics in particular. You know, if you know the history of Power Rangers, it's like, okay, they had all this footage from an old Japanese Super Sentai show that they then like spliced with American actors, and there's all these like weird scenarios that pop up because, okay, well, in this footage that we have, it's only the yellow, blue, and pink Rangers. So like in our American actor portion, we need to figure out a way to like get them separated. So like when the fight scene happens, it's only those three. And like, as a result, some of the stories are just absolutely wild. And I think that like really seeped into like my own sort of sensibilities and how I approach stories.
I don't know any other like Japanese stuff that they did that stuff like that with, you know, I'm just saying.
It's so fun. And like, you could see it as like, oh, this is like a cheap way to like create a TV show for kids. But I actually see it as like a whole different type of creativity, like working with what you have to create. That's something that's like really special.
There was also a level of either earned or unearned confidence. Like I was watching like the build-up commercials to the first episode of Power Rangers. Like, you don't buckle up, kids. You don't know what's fucking coming for you. And they were very exciting of like the robots, the fighting, the combination of like giant robots, you know, some sort of martial arts in coordinated, colorful outfits with, you know, sweet guitar licks. Unlock something, I think, in everyone who was growing up that day of like, holy shit, this was like a hit of crack cocaine for kids that like, okay, we need every fucking product that has a sticker on this. Whatever you got, Grandma, I need it.
Truly, but like in all seriousness, I don't know that I would be like telling stories professionally without Power Rangers. So.
And it's important, and it's interesting because like I'm older than the Power Rangers generation, right? I have a lot of friends younger than me, you guys included, who are formatively changed by Power Rangers, and it's important to them in ways that it's not to me. And it kind of makes me feel like Mike Gold, you know, because I am of a different generation than him, and I have different wants and needs and likes. And the way that
he just rocks to play with.
Well, listen, he had a lot to play with. It's just that those things are like just became part of the bedrock of everything else that was built on. Just like, like the way, you know, there's certain things that, you know, kind of build on, like some of the stories that I was reading or involved with when I was younger. Like for example, like Battle of the Planets. Battle of the Planets was an anime from 1972 that in 1985 Alex Toth got around and reformatted it, and we got Battle of the Planets, and similar types of things that happen. People kind of built on things, and what you guys got, and the thing that you were at the right age. And that's the thing about comics, media, pop culture. It's whatever hits you at the time when you are most receptive to it is what's going to move you. And the fact that it moves you in certain ways is what makes all of this worth it. It's kind of like, Dean Haspiel, we've mentioned him earlier, friend of the show, friend of mine. He says all the time that, once he started reading comics, he became unable to do anything else. Like that's all he can do, because it's all he is. And thank God, because he's great at it, but it's part of it. Like whether it's the cartoons you were watching, or the books you were reading, or the movies you were seeing, or whatever it is, I'm sure there were plenty of play action things on the playgrounds where somebody was the Red Ranger and somebody wanted to be the Green Ranger, and there were some arguments about that. I'm sure that happened.
Yeah, of course. I mean, honestly, like the Blue Ranger for me was because he was, Power Rangers happened when I was in 3rd grade, I think. And that's when I first got glasses, and the Blue Ranger had glasses, and Superman had glasses, but he didn't really need them. You know what I mean? But Blue Ranger needed them. And that was like really cool to me, and I think that, I don't know, I feel like some people who don't have this connection to pop culture or stories or whatever just don't really understand that it's not just that, like, oh, we think this is cool and we like thinking about Star Wars lore or Star Trek lore or whatever. It's like, it's more ingrained than that. It's like it's like part of it's in our blood. You know what I mean? Like it's part of who we are. And I think like that's something really special. And to be able to create anything, I don't know. It's just like, it's just real. It's all I've ever wanted to do. And it feels really special to be able to do it in any way at all.
Well, I'm very glad you guys are doing it. You're doing it well. You're getting better all the time. And this is a culmination of a lot of hard work, a lot of perseverance, as we've been kind of talking about on this show. And again, so August 7th is the day. Make sure you're at your comic shop. Make sure you're getting the Pedestrian. Walk, don't run. Make sure you follow all legal signs and crosswalks in order to get there. And whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Like really quick. We're gonna end this up. Thanks everybody for this. But the sound effect of the pedestrian walking, I noticed as I was reading. Whose idea was the wording of it?
I think that kind of came from. I think that kind of came from a lot of the work I do. There's lots of photo reference, so there's lots of photos in me in the suit for photo reference. So a lot of what you see is kind of me taking pictures of myself, taking pictures of my kids, taking pictures of my wife. We were in lockdown and just like, okay, I'm gonna need some photo reference. So setting up a camera and, especially for the animation, like getting that, I went for kind of a rotoscopic aspect, and that was an element that really like kind of picked up, because there is a sound when you're wearing sort of that material, and that we thought that would be a very visceral type of thing that would add to the layer of weirdness. Because if you're on the street and someone's dressed like this is walking up to you, you're going to be really put out for a while, especially if there's a sound like what the fuck? What the fuck is that?
For me, it's in Dumb and Dumber when he's pretending to run while he's in the car. It feels like you're running at an incredible rate, Harry. And that sound is what I think of when I hear the wish.
Sound. You will find it. Look for it in
where there is a future moment where there's a critical moment where the chips are down and you hear the sound and you know things are going to be okay when you hear like things are at the awesome. Worst.
That's perfect, and that's comics right there. That is good storytelling.
like, oh my God, is he back? It's kind of like I kind of attribute it to, like, I think my favorite moment in any sort of superhero medium is in Superman 2, where Superman gets his powers back.
Yeah.
Zod and his cronies have taken over the Daily Planet. You hear that whoosh, and then Superman's outside, and he is pissed.
Yeah.
But he's still polite. Excuse me, General. Would you care to step outside? That gives me chills every time, and these are the moments that I think, you know, we try to strive for, of like, something's going to go down. It's time to boogie now, and that's, I think there are elements to those films that have aged well and maybe not have aged well, but you know, Superman and Superman 2 especially have these moments of, you believe this, and there is a rush and an excitement that happens when this guy comes and he saves the day, where I don't think I'm not feeling these moments as much in recent ones. I'm looking very much forward to James Gunn's Superman, because James Gunn's Super is absolutely a big influence on this, of his Rainn Wilson vigilante, super ultra violent, makes you uncomfortable with the violence in it. And I think that really brings into this of like the relationship to violence in the story, that I think we are very careful with as well, of like, yes, there is violence, but there's a reason and there's a cost to it. And violence is not a solution to problems, because it really just leads to more problems.
Right.
Great. All right, guys. Thanks everybody for listening and hanging with us. We've had a great time, talking about this. I don't know. Apparently I'm about to be, Ned Stark. I'm not sure what's going on right now.
And you're going to be knighted.
I'm wearing my kimono and rocking my katana. It's I'm drinking Japanese whiskey. It's a Friday night at the Von Gorman compound.
Well, I'm I wish you all the best. I think I'm going to go watch Superman 2, to be honest with you.
There you go.
But thanks, guys.
Those Superman. Just the sound bites that stick with you.
Yes.
And the touchdowns of sounds.
Thank you for having us. This is a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, you guys. I really appreciate it. Everybody, make sure you pick up the Pedestrian by Magma Comics, August 7th. Thanks for being here, guys. We really appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thank you, Bob.
This has been a production on the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?